What's up, everyone? My name is Mike, and this is The Bored Cyborg. My phone is vibrating. God damn it, it ruined my intro. Welcome back to yet another episode. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at my top 10 films from the decade. That is, any film made from 2010 to 2019. I know I'm about a month late here, but you know, this list took me quite a while to fine-tune and get perfectly right. I still don't know if it's right. As you guys know, my opinions are always changing, but I have so much fun doing these lists. I've got 5 honorable mentions. I had about 15. I had to kill my darlings, kill the shit out of them, and I've narrowed it down to 5 honorable mentions and 10 of my favorite films from a really, really solid decade in cinema. I don't know what a lot of people are saying about the decade, if it was a good decade, a bad decade, but I really think that this decade was killer, especially toward the middle to the later end of the decade. In terms of certain genres, the genre films were kind of struggling in the earlier part of the decade, but I think as time went on through the decade, they really started changing and evolving, which is really exciting. I'm going to get to talking about these films right now. Feel free to leave your thoughts about my list in the comments below. I can't wait to see everyone's lists of their favorite films of the decade, so please leave those down below. I'm going to read each and every one of them, and we can get a discussion rolling as usual. Keep rolling, 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 rolling. My trusty little stand that is actually a battery for my lights. Alright, my first honorable mention this decade was the decade of Marvel, right? The Marvel Cinematic Universe came into being, well, in the late 2000s, the late noughts, but really started to come into its own in this decade. So, my first honorable mention is a Marvel film. It is by far my favorite Marvel film. I love this movie. It is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I have it on 3D Blu-ray, but I've never seen a 3D Blu-ray, or I don't own a player either, but Captain America: The Winter Soldier is my favorite of all the Marvel films. In fact, it may be my favorite superhero film of this decade. I haven't really thought about that. That's another conversation for another day. But Winter Soldier, what I love so much about it is that this focuses on Steve Rogers, Captain America. It focuses on him solely. None of the other characters make little cameos here and there, but it is a story about him trying to clear his name. It has a very Bond feel to it. This was the Russo brothers. I believe it was their first film, and it's interesting to see how they've changed over the years. I still think this is their best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The practical effects, the action sequences are phenomenal. All the performances, of course, are great. There's none of that cheesiness that I feel is imbuing Marvel films these days. The shoddy dialogue. This has it all. This is a killer action flick, one of the best of the decade, one of my favorite films of the decade. My next honorable mention is The Raid Redemption. Oh my god, dude. When I saw this film back in 2012, my mind blew up. I had no idea that these types of action films were actually being made in the late noughts. Not to this standard, but there were a lot of DTV action films around the time that were coming and going and just went under my radar, man, I gotta admit. And so when The Raid came out, it piqued my interest, and I was working at a big bookstore at the time. A buddy of mine told me about it. I sat down and watched this movie, and my mind blew up. I could not believe what I was seeing. I had never seen this caliber of action in a film. It is hard-hitting, long takes, shot low, shot wide. Gareth Edwards, or Evans, Gareth Evans, I always get the two names mixed up for obvious reasons. Gareth Evans knows how to shoot these films. He grew up around watching these types of films, and it really shows. It shows that he's a student of the genre. And The Raid, Iko Uwais put him on the map. Mad Dog, I always forget his name, but some of the best fight sequences of the decade, actually ever. I would go as far to say ever made some of the best fight sequences in this movie. It's basically a 90-minute action movie. It's unbelievable. The Raid. Next up is Nightcrawler. God, it's gonna be a gush fest, this whole video, but Nightcrawler blew me away. It's a story about a man who finds an opportunity to exploit violence and crime to his favor, to benefit him financially, really. It follows Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Lou, who gets into freelance photography. You know, he's a driven young dude, and he sees an opportunity to start banking off of other people's demise. This film has a lot to say about social media, about the social media age that we're in, and how, you know, the first thing that people do when a fight breaks out is bust out their phones as opposed to trying to mediate or do something about it physically or with their words verbally. So it really plays on all those ideas, and this film is one of those where each set piece just ramps it up more and more. Lou descends deeper and deeper into insanity, and it's incredible. It's a fantastic movie that has a lot to say about just the social state that we're in as a society and what fascinates us. This film plays with all those ideas and makes you feel icky by the end. Nightcrawler is phenomenal. Next up, I do not own yet, but will as soon as I find it. That is The Lighthouse. I just watched this film a couple weeks ago, and yes, it made its way into my honorable mentions for the decade because I absolutely fell in love with this film. I need to watch it again. I'm still digesting it because there's a lot going on, a lot of different layers, but I actually think it's a simple story about madness and isolation and what isolation can do to a human being. We're social creatures, and this film really explores those ideas. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe give some of their best performances ever in this film. They are incredible together, but what really makes this movie all come together for me is the utilization of the black and white that Robert Eggers chooses to use for this film, as well as a 4:3 aspect ratio. This man shot this movie with film from the 30s and 40s, as well as cameras from the 30s and 40s. And the authenticity that this dude puts into his work, I can't help but love everything that he's doing, from The Witch to The Lighthouse. I like The Lighthouse even more just because it's more my speed, you know, black and white. But I love how the bars on the side of the screen really confine our characters and confine our audience and make us feel imprisoned like we're on that island with them. And like I said, it's a story about a descent into madness. It's really that simple on its face, but goddamn is this movie layered with Greek mythology and tragedy and just imagery that you will burn itself into your mind for eternity. I love The Lighthouse. Can't wait to watch it again. One of the best films of the year of 2019 and one of the best films of the freaking decade. The Lighthouse. My last honorable mention, now that 10 minutes has gone by in this video, Mission Impossible Fallout. This is the best of the Mission Impossible films. These movies are getting better and better. Arguably. Exponentially getting better. I can't wait to see what McQuarrie and Cruise do next. They are a match made in heaven. Carpenter and Russell. They are Scorsese and De Niro. Scorsese and DiCaprio. These two are making some of the best action films ever made. And I could say that the Mission Impossible movies made in this decade are amongst the best action films of the decade, but Fallout excels over them all. A straight up action film. No bullshit, no supernatural elements, no comic book, no superheroes, nothing. Just a straight balls to the wall action flick with Tom Cruise's crazy ass doing all of his own stunts. Henry Cavill, who is just incredible in this role, really made me fall in love with the actor. Their chemistry is amazing. And the twists and turns that happen throughout this film, you know, it's a Mission Impossible film, so the film is always playing with your mind and playing with the camera in really cool ways, and also the characters. But Fallout is such a badass action movie, man. If you haven't seen it, absolutely check it out. My favorite Mission Impossible movie, and one of my favorite films of the decade. Alright, now we're getting to my top 10, finally. Forgive me, guys. I'm finding it hard to fit all of my feelings of these films into 30 seconds to a minute, so it is what it is. You know I like to ramble, as I'm doing now. My number 10. God, this list was so hard to make. But my number 10 is Under the Skin. Under the Skin. Oh my goodness, when I watched this film, it utterly scared me to death. It chilled me to the bone. Just the way it's shot, the moodiness of the atmosphere, the dark aesthetic, the lack of dialogue, the chilling score, I hate to use the word again, but the chilling stoic performance of Scarlett Johansson as an alien being who finds her way onto this planet for a purpose. I'm not going to say what the purpose is. In fact, that's up to interpretation. I believe. It's hard to even talk about this movie and what it's about, but Scarlett Johansson's character is going around and finding unsuspecting men. I don't want to say what I really don't want to spoil it, because it's really that special. All I'll say is she's doing something with these men that you would never even conceive. You'll never even believe when you see it. In fact, when I saw it, there's a big scene in the middle of the film where it shows what happens to these men. All I'll say is, that's all I'll say. Those of you who've seen it know what I'm talking about. The image of this scene is one of the most disturbing I've seen ever, really. It literally made me, like, look away. Like, I was like, whoa, what the fuck am I looking at? You know, like, what just happened? And then the next shot is just even more crazy, and you start, like, what is going on? It's so otherworldly. That is what's so cool about this film, and it reminds me of the 70s. And just the lack of exposition, the lack of any direction, it just makes you feel confused and bewildered and entertained beyond all belief and just scared. And this movie scared me. That's why it's here. It is such an incredible, haunting film. Check it out if you haven't seen it. This is Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, my number 10. My number 9, I just saw a few days ago, and I knew it was one of the best films of the decade. This film, I'm still digesting it. You know, it's one of those that you're still digesting, and it's so good. It's one of the best. I don't own it yet, but that is Parasite. Parasite is the perfect example of a film that has something to say about classism. It follows one family, forgive me, I forgot their names already, but it's the family that Kang Ho-sung is the father of. Kang Ho-sung is one of my favorite actors, actually. He's like the South Korean Daniel Day-Lewis, I like to dub him. But Parasite is a film about classism and about what money, or even the prospect of having money, could do to someone, or the yearning for money can do to someone. That is what this film is about in essence, but it goes so much deeper than that. It goes so much deeper into economic status and what it means to be a family. See, because the Park family, they're cold and separated from one another, but the I forget their name, the poor family, the family that's how do I say, ingratiating, eking their way into the life of the affluent Parks. That family, they're so close, you know, and you really feel for these characters. You connect with them as human beings, and it's harder to connect with the affluent Parks because they're so cold and distant from one another in this big, spacious house. Unbelievable performances. The direction by Joon-ho Bong is incredible. It's his best yet, and I love almost all of Joon Bong's films that I've seen. The Host, Mother, Snowpiercer, Memories of Murder. The only one I haven't seen is Okja, actually, which I really should have watched before doing this video. But I love Joon-ho Bong's work. The camera work in this is perfect. Technically, this film is perfect. The lighting, the production value, the production is perfect. The cinematography is slow and calculated, methodical. Every shot, every crossfade, every edit, every cut is pinpoint perfect to the point where you don't even notice it. And that's how you know this is a great film. I love it. Parasite is my number 9 favorite film of the decade. My number 8, I do own. That is Mad Max Fury Road. It feels like this film came out forever ago. Goddamn, guys. I've always been a huge fan of the Mad Max movies. Road Warrior's always been one of my favorite action films ever. And when I got into the theater and sat down and watched Fury Road, which I saw in theater a few times, actually, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Utterly. I could not believe what I was seeing. Nothing like this has ever been achieved in cinema, and nothing like this has been achieved since this film came out. It's incredible. You'd think this film would have, like, sprouted a whole bunch of similar types of narratives or films, but it's one of a kind still. Nobody can do what George Miller had in mind. This is a movie about getting from A to Z, but between that, it's one long chase. It's one long chase sequence. It follows Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron, God almighty, and starring Tom Hardy as Mad Max. Now, this is really Furiosa's show. Tom Hardy is there as Mad Max, but Furiosa is really the star of this one, and I love her character so much. On its technicality alone, this film is perfection. It's 95% practical effects, which is mind-blowing to even fathom. So almost everything you're seeing on screen happened in camera, which is amazing. The color palette of this film is perfect. The bright, pronounced blue sky set against the dusty, post-apocalyptic wasteland of sand and ruin. And then you have the scenes with the little bit of greenery and the water, and it just... The film has the perfect look to it, and this is one of the best action films ever fucking made, period, no question about it. Mad Max Fury Road is my number 8. My number 7! Another one that just completely blew me away. It's one of those films from the decade that you didn't see coming. I didn't see this coming. John fucking Wick. Now, I didn't see this film in theaters. Can you believe that? I was so disappointed with how action films were going. And like I said, I wasn't aware of the underground, the DTV land, where the true action flicks were still being made, sort of coming off of the 90s. And so everybody was like, you haven't seen John Wick? It was about six months to a year after it came out. It was finally on Blu-ray. Picked it up from Ed McKay, the store I was working at. And I'm sitting down on my couch watching this movie. The first half is a slow burn. It's the build-up, right? And I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't see a trailer. And I'm sitting there on the couch with my dog, my beagle, right? He was close to a puppy. He was like 3 years old at that point. And so when the big moment happens where the beagle, spoilers, where the dog that his dead wife got him gets killed, which is the catalyzing event for the entire franchise, that moment ripped my heart out. And I said to myself, aloud, I don't know if I could do this. I'm looking at my dog, I'm like tearing up. In fact, a few tears had been shed, and I was like, oh my god, like I don't know if I could do this. That shit is awful. But fucking Christ, am I glad I got through it. Because I was literally about to shut it off, but then 15 minutes later, 10 minutes later, when he starts going on his rampage, when they intrude his home, and he just starts taking them out, my jaw was on the floor, guys. I can't describe how I felt about this, and I can't contain my excitement. I was off of the couch, pumping my fist at the screen. It was insane. The choreography, the editing, the shooting, the lighting. I had never seen an action movie like this, and we have now, because John Wick set a standard in the business, of which is not even being taken advantage of to its full effect, except for if your name's Scott Adkins and Jesse V. Johnson. But John Wick just floored me. Oh my god, I love this film. It had to be on my list. John Wick is my number 7 favorite film of the decade, no doubt about it. Keanu is a fucking legend. Bill and Ted, Point Break, Speed, The Matrix, and John Wick. My number 7. Alright, this is gonna be a long video, guys. Forgive me. I can't contain myself. I'm about to explode. I need a sedative. My number 6. Green Room. Jeremy Saulnier's Green Room. Talk about a filmmaker that's really coming to his own during this decade. Holy shit, Saulnier is just knocking it out of the park. I watched Murder Party first, Blue Ruin second, and his films just exponentially are getting better. Save for his last one, Hold the Dark. Wasn't a huge fan of it, but Green Room is his best film thus far. This is a perfect film. That is a horror film. It is a thriller. It is a visceral thriller. It's a visceral horror thriller. There we go. That's what we'll call it. With some incredibly graphic violence. This film is about a punk band, a struggling punk band who is literally struggling to just feed themselves and get around from job to job, who takes a job at a, unbeknownst to them, takes a job, oh no, actually they have an idea of what they're getting into. They take a job to perform, and they're a punk band, to perform at this sort of Nazi, white nationalist punk venue. Really gritty, really grimy, really icky feeling place. Patrick Stewart plays the leader of this white nationalist, these neo-Nazis, and it follows them getting into some crazy fucking shit because of what Anton Yelchin's character sees go down in the green room of this venue. He shouldn't have seen it. fate had it that he did, and it sends him spiraling down this maddening hole of chaos, violence, fucking crazy, scary racism. It is so tightly wound as a thriller. The writing is perfect. The direction is perfect. The performances are perfect. Everything about this film just knocks it out of the park. No question about it. And it's also a film about finding your courage amidst evil. That's what Anton Yelchin and Imogen Poots characters really represent. Man, this film is just so phenomenal from top to bottom. I love this movie. It is a horror film. It's a psychological, visceral horror film. Green Room is my number 6. My number 5 came out the same year. It was a hell of a year for horror. And that is Get Out. How can this not be on this list? As a horror fan, as a fan of cinema. Jordan Peele made a horror film unlike anything we've ever seen. It's from the perspective of a black man. This is a film about what it's like to be black in America. Everyone should see this film. Of every color, creed, religion, race, I don't care who you are. Because art is all about perspective. And Get Out gave me perspective. It follows Chris, Daniel Kaluuya, who is dating a white woman, and he's going to meet her family. It's a big deal. They're very affluent, very, sort of, not ritzy, but they've got a lot of money. Sort of your stereotypical affluent suburban couple. I can't even describe what happens in this movie. It takes so many twists and turns and Twilight Zone-esque sort of gotcha moments or like Twilight Zone-esque what sort of moments. Jordan Peele is obviously a student of Twilight Zone. But this film, again, is all about what it's like to be an African-American in this country and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's so important for those reasons. But outside of that, this is an unbelievable horror film. That is one of the most tense films I've ever seen. The hypnotism scene is literal. I'm not kidding you. I had to pause this film. I don't have anxiety, as you probably tell. I don't get anxious, but this film made me anxious during that sequence. I had to pause the movie. And then when he drops into, I was like, I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh my god, like, holy shit, this is too much for me to handle. One of the best horror scenes of the decade, if not ever, honestly. The performances are perfect here. The script is so tight and so smart and so multi-layered. I love this film beyond belief. It's my number 5, Get Out. My number 4, I don't yet own, but that is Quentin Tarantino's best film of the decade, and that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was Hateful Eight, and that probably would have been here if it wasn't for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I love film. We all love film. But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood reminded me why I love film. And why I write. Why I write stories. And why I care so much. And why we care so much about these stories. It's a love letter to Hollywood. It's a love letter to fans of Hollywood and fans of cinema. It's a love letter to cinema. And it made my heart fucking melt. We get a perspective of what it's like as an actor in Hollywood and what they go through, and it follows Leonardo DiCaprio's character who is aging and he's not able to find the roles that he once used to be able to find, and in the process of taking lesser roles in spaghetti westerns which has a funny line, spaghetti westerns, nobody watches those, they all fucking suck. But through this process of him taking these lesser roles, he finds he realizes, he remembers why he loves film so much and why he loves acting and entertaining. There's this moment, there's a scene with this little girl who says that was some of the best acting she had ever seen. And I'm getting emotional right now, but I got so emotional at that scene because the look on DiCaprio's face, the performance there is just, the light bulb goes off and he's like, this is why I do this, and any endeavor. You could watch this movie and feel that for any endeavor, but when I'm writing and or making videos and people really enjoy them and are entertained by them, I get that same feeling. This is why I'm doing this. It really spoke to me on so many levels. And also Cliff Booth's character, Brad Pitt, who is my favorite character in the film, one of my favorites of the decade. His introduction made me cry. And it's a wordless introduction. It has some music, and it shows him leaving DiCaprio's side. He's like his chauffeur, and then he goes off on his own thing, and he's a free bird. He's speeding around like a stuntman would in the streets of Hollywood. He gets home and it's this little like mobile home with his dog and movie memorabilia everywhere, and it just, he loves movies. This is why he does it. And there's just so many, it's multi-layered, man. There's so many layers to this film, but that's just on its face, that's what this film did for me, and I absolutely love it. It is an epic film. I didn't even talk about the Manson side stories here, and the killer ending. One of the best last 10 minutes of any film on this list. I absolutely loved it. Of course, it's got the signature Tarantino, abrupt, incredibly over-the-top violence that Nicotero always helps with, Greg Nicotero. So, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my number 4. It may be my favorite Tarantino film. Pulp Fiction is still number 1, but I think it beats out Reservoir Dogs for my number 2. And it may one day supersede the masterpiece that is Pulp Fiction. But for now, it is my number 4 favorite film of the decade. Words can't express how much I love all these films, but I'm trying my best. Oh, man. Woo! Talk about getting emotional. Mother! You have to say it like that, right? Mother is one of my favorite films ever made. It's in my top 50. In fact, the last few films that I talked about here, Green Room and Get Out, are in my top 50. So is John Wick and Fury Road, so it was a hell of a decade, honestly. It's open to interpretation, but it's pretty, for me, it seems pretty straightforward what Darren Aronofsky was saying. And him and I have a lot of the same sentiments when it comes to what our species is doing to our planet, our home. Mother follows Jennifer Lawrence's character, Mother, who has a home. A nice, well-kept home. She's very happy in it with her lover. And all of a sudden, people start showing up. People just start showing up, willy-nilly. Not invited, just start coming into her home, and at first it's pretty passive. No one's really doing anything too crazy, but as things go on, things get crazier and crazier. More and more people show up, and she is just in a whirlwind of confusion. And she is our vessel, the audience's vessel, of course, and we feel everything she is going through. Jennifer Lawrence has an extremely expressive performance here, and she does confused and bewildered so goddamn well, which translates perfectly to the audience and to me. It is a poem, actually. It is a visual poem about how important it is to take care of our home. And by our home, I mean our planet. I absolutely love Mother. It's his favorite film, or my favorite film of Darren Aronofsky's, and it is my number 3. I could cry thinking about this movie. It is so beautiful, so moving, so disturbing, and one of the best films of the decade. Mother! Number 3. Wow, this movie, I didn't expect this one, guys. I didn't expect this one. I remember calling up my buddy after I watched it, who was a big fan of it, and I was very emotional after watching it, and I was like, dude, this is one of the best films ever made. Yeah, ever made. Easily. My number 2 is Grand Budapest Hotel. I have always been sort of a passive fan of Wes Anderson. I like Steve Zissou, I like Royal Tenenbaums, Bottle Rocket, not a fan, even though that was his first film. I need to see Fantastic Mr. Fox and a few others, Moonrise Kingdom. But Grand Budapest Hotel did things with cinema that I had never seen before. And I've only seen once more with The Lighthouse, actually. And what I'm actually talking about is very technical. It is the aspect ratios. He is constantly changing the aspect ratio in order to make you feel a certain way about a certain scene. And it's an incredible usage of the aspect ratio and of different lenses and camera lenses and camera techniques. It's brilliant. The cinematography is perfect, you know, Wes Anderson style, sort of dead on. Every shot is like you're looking into a diorama, you know, like the dioramas you would build in school and everything, and that you see like professional for models and things. Every one of his frames, every one of his shots is like you're peering into one of those. The cast is incredible. I mean, Wes Anderson gets everybody and their mother in his films, rightfully so. On a technical level, this film excels so much. The first shot is a matte painting. I literally teared up in the first shot, and I knew I was in for a treat. I don't see matte paintings anymore, and when I saw the matte painting beautifully drawn with the composition, I literally started tearing up, and I was like, uh-oh, I'm gonna like this one. And I did. I ended up loving it. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's in my top 30. I didn't even talk about what the story is about because it's just an adventure. It's an adventure. It's a rollicking adventure is what Grand Budapest Hotel is. It's never, ever boring. It follows a character, a concierge named Gustav. Gustav, that's it. He's sort of the epicenter of all these other little stories that are going on, and he finds himself caught up in a whole bunch of different crime-esque stories. So some involving theft, you know, there's chase sequences, there's a family fortune that's sort of as far as I remember, sort of up for grabs, and there's also a love story with Gustav. But Grand Budapest has so much going for it, but at its heart, it's just a feel-good, hilarious adventure film where that is written to the T. This is quintessential Wes Anderson. It's my favorite film of his that I've seen. One of my favorite films of all time. My number two, is Grand Budapest Hotel. If you've not seen this, go do it right now! Right now, damn it. My number one, this list was so difficult to make. My number one, it had to be this. It had to be this. It just makes so much sense with my taste and my love for the genre of action. John Wick blew me away. One of the best action films of the decade. So is 3 for that matter, which didn't make my honorable mention, sadly. I still love it. But John Wick 2 is my favorite film of the decade. John Wick 2 I saw in theaters 3 times. Twice I saw it in theaters. I've seen it 3 times at home. It never gets old. I adore this film from top to bottom. I think it may be. This is controversial. I'd love to know what you guys think, so feel free to leave what you think in the comments. But I think this is one of the best action films ever made. I'm talking top 5, if not top 3, if not number 1. Yes, I said it. That's a list for another day. That's an impossible list to make. But John Wick 2 takes everything that the first one did, keeps its momentum, and just throws you right into the action, non-stop, A to Z, action set piece after action set piece that keep getting better and f***ing better. Chad Stahelski showed us what he could do with John Wick. And David Leitch, but it's clear to see Stahelski was the mastermind here. Stahelski brings his knowledge of stunt work and of choreography and of shooting action into this franchise. He had been working in the 90s, well, since the 90s, I should say, in a lot of low-budget action films. Things like Nemesis. He actually was in one of the sequels, I want to say 3 or 4, Albert Pyun movies. And so he's been working his way up. And these films are a culmination of everything that man has learned. He is a genius when it comes to this genre. And John Wick 2 starts off with a car chase, which goes into a John Wick fighting people, human beings with his vehicle, to an underground, it's a globe-trotting film too, right? So we end up in Rome, and it's got this incredible sequence at an outdoor sort of nightclub, that with the lighting in this film is incredible. It looks like a comic book. It exudes character. Every single frame, the atmosphere exudes from the screen. The city of New York is a character in and of itself. There's a whole underworld and underground of hit people, hit men and women doing their thing and keeping the gears of the city turning. It's incredible. It deals with mythology, Knights of the Round Table, which is mythology, and Keanu f***ing Reeves. I haven't even talked about Keanu Reeves coming in around 50 years old, doing all of his own stunts, learning all these incredible movements, like judo and taekwondo and jiu-jitsu and gun fu. See, this film is a culmination of everything that the 80s and 90s did with action. It's a culmination of the gun fu, the well-choreographed action sequences, the long takes, the scene with Cassian and John, Cassian played by Common, one of my favorite rappers, where they're having a gun battle. And they're in the subway system, which is all whited out, and they're doing a clandestine sort of gun battle where they're trying to shoot nonchalantly, shoot at each other. It's brilliant. And then they get outside and they start throwing bowls. And what I love is a lot of the action sequences don't have any music. It's just hard-hitting sound effects and great action cinematography and choreography. The music is fantastic, by the way, too. It's iconic. I hear it playing right now. Whenever, it instantly transports you. And that's what these films are, transportative. They're not just B-action movies that just give you some good action and say, all right, see you next time. No, this gives you a fully developed, bleeding with atmosphere world that these characters inhabit, and you truly believe in this world. You believe that it's real and that it's functioning. And that's what John Wick does best, and that's why it's my favorite film of the decade. One of my favorite action films of all time, if not my favorite. It is a culmination of everything I love about the genre. I could keep on talking about it, but this video is 48 minutes long. As it is, John Wick 2, my number 1. Whew! Alright guys, hopefully you stuck in for this entire video. If you did, thank you so much. I know it was a long one and my ass is rambling about all these films that I love so much. It's just a 30-minute gush fest, it feels like. But I love all of these films, guys. And it was really hard to put together this list. I'm dying to know what your lists look like. I know they're going to be so different. Really looking forward to reading through them and getting a little conversation going, as per usual. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel and want to see more videos like it, feel free to hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg, out.